The word chosen runs through the pages of Scripture from its very first books. It appears connected to faith, to identity, and to the relationship between God and humanity. It is a word that has been read aloud in synagogues and churches. It has been whispered in prayer, and it has been repeated across generations of faith. But what does this word truly mean in the Bible, especially when we apply it to ourselves? When Scripture speaks of being chosen, is it speaking of privilege, of salvation, or of something deeper and more demanding? To answer that, we must allow the Bible itself to guide the explanation. We must carefully observe how this word is used throughout the biblical story, letting Scripture speak before tradition speaks for it. Over time, the word chosen has taken on very personal meanings. It is often understood as a sign of individual value or spiritual distinction. Many people hear this word and immediately think of themselves. Am I one of the chosen? Their story, their destiny. Yet when we read Scripture attentively, we discover something different. The biblical text presents a broader and more responsible understanding. In the Bible, being chosen rarely begins with personal benefit, even when the question feels deeply personal. It points, above all, to mission, to faithfulness, and to calling, to a role within God's unfolding story. In the Old Testament, the idea of being chosen appears first in a collective sense. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, Israel is presented as the people whom the Lord chose, but the text itself takes care to clarify what that choice means. God declares that Israel was not chosen because it was larger, stronger, or more righteous than other nations. The choice flows from God's love and from His faithfulness to His promise. This choice is rooted in covenant, not comparison, in relationship, not rank. In Exodus chapter 19, this choice receives shape and direction. Israel is called to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, a people set apart not to withdraw from the world, but to stand between God and humanity, carrying responsibility, teaching, and witness. The choice, therefore, is not an end in itself. It exists so that the people may represent God, preserve His revelation, and serve as a witness among the nations. In the Hebrew Scriptures, to be chosen is to carry responsibility, not to claim privilege. The prophet Isaiah deepens this understanding. In Isaiah chapter 42, the chosen one is presented as a servant. This servant is the one upon whom God places His Spirit to bring justice to the nations. He does not raise his voice. He does not break what is already bruised. He moves quietly, faithfully, carrying the weight of the mission without seeking recognition. Scripture associates divine choice not with personal elevation, but with a willingness to serve where faithfulness matters more than visibility. In the New Testament, the concept of being chosen is not abandoned. It is deepened. In John chapter 15, Jesus says to His disciples, "You did not choose me, I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit." Here, choice is tied to being sent. To be chosen is to be called to participate in God's mission in the world. Later, the Apostle Peter returns to this language. He speaks of believers as a chosen generation and a royal priesthood, and he explains the purpose of that choice: to proclaim, to live, and to bear witness to the light they have received. At this point, Scripture invites a pause, not to add new ideas, but to let the pattern become visible. Again and again, the language of choice is followed by movement, by responsibility, by action that reaches beyond the self. Being chosen is never presented as a private possession. It is presented as a shared calling, rooted in obedience and sustained by faithfulness. One of the most important principles of reading Scripture is this: words find their meaning within the context in which they are used. The Bible applies the word chosen to peoples, to communities, to specific tasks, and to a way of living before God. It speaks of choice in moments of sending, in moments of testing, and often in moments of quiet perseverance. When context is ignored, biblical language is reshaped into something the text itself does not support. In Scripture, being chosen is never an invitation to pride. It is an invitation to faithfulness, to endurance, and to trust lived out over time. When the Bible speaks of being chosen, it is not elevating some above others. It is calling men and women to walk responsibly before God and within history. To be chosen in Scripture is to be set apart not for the ego, but for service, not for exaltation, but for faithfulness. It is a calling that unfolds slowly, often quietly, and frequently in ways that remain unseen. Understanding this leads us toward a more mature faith, a humbler faith, and a more conscious faith. A faith that listens before it claims, that serves before it speaks, that remains faithful even when recognition never comes. And perhaps this is why the question matters so much. Because in the Bible, God's choice does not end with who we are. It does not settle on identity alone. It moves outward, into action, into faithfulness, into life shaped by obedience. God's choice begins with how we are called to live and continues in how faithfully we walk that calling, day after day, before God and before the world. If this message touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Your support helps this message reach even more hearts. God bless you.